refer to, but I'm hoping to summarize pretty briefly. And I'm going to try to do that with 3 words. And there'll be a little bit of verbiage around each of those words, okay? Never fear. The first word is urgency. We are living with uncertainty. It's very stressful, but it's real and it's accelerating. Climate change is what I'm talking about. And city dwellers are responsible for 70% of greenhouse gas emissions that are causing this, and particularly in countries like the United States, not all countries. And community-wide, with the government leading the way, is a key. And it is possible, according to many experts, that if we do the right things, we can turn it around. So there are many reasons behind this urgency about people's lives and safety, and I'm sure you know a lot of them. Health, weather, food and energy costs, natural systems, future generations, and you can go on. There are also many benefits to acting early, and there's short-term benefits, there's long-term benefits. And so the sense of urgency kind of comes and goes because we all have lots on our minds, and there are many other important things too. I want to just put that word in your mind, urgency, and that is what the feeling tone that we need to go with this. The second word is priorities. PCA has already put out some very critical actions that you've gotten several times probably. And it really boils down to building the energy that's coming from our buildings and our transportation that's creating a lot of this problem. In fact, in our city in particular, and it's different for different cities, but 90% of our emissions, I think it's 91%, according to our last greenhouse gas inventory, are coming from those 2 sources. So are they a priority? They are a priority, yay. So those 2 things are things to keep in mind. It's so easy to get distracted by the many details and things that will help those things. You don't want to get distracted by them. You want, what are the things that will cause and help those 2 areas? There are many other really important and wonderful things too, but it is easy to lose focus. In terms of buildings then and transportation, the third word is targeted action. So using those priorities and targeting the action. We can't do everything, and our resources are limited. And so in the buildings, something that we perhaps can do is work with getting this quicker and more widespread community-wide transition to clean energy in our heating and cooling systems in our we have a wonderful program that needs to be expanded with the Energy Smart East Side, and we also need to not only work with that, but there could be some permitting kinds of things that the council could do to when people are going to upgrade their heating system, and it's time, and over the next 20 years, probably everybody's going to upgrade, then what can we do to ensure that they have an energy efficient and clean system? And then the second area, of course, transportation. You know, there's a lot of regional things that we don't have control over, but I like what's happening with our light rail in our community, Sunrail. I've been a part of that and really enjoyed the meeting last, I guess it was last week, that we had over at the train station. And then another idea is getting from being able to get around Issaquah. I mean, I live in downtown Issaquah in Old Town. I was not able to get over to Costco. I wanted to take the bus. There's no bus that takes you over there. There isn't any. And I ended up, because I am able to walk some, to going to, oh, I'm just about on my time. Okay, I'm going to go through the urgency, priorities, and targeted action, partnering with our community, in our community, and regionally. I'm sure you can remember that. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you so much, Anne. Clerk, has anyone else signed up to speak?
No one else has signed up. There are a few folks with us virtually, but I'm not seeing any of them indicate a desire to speak at this point.
Is there anyone else in the room who would like to speak? Okay, David Kapler coming up.
Good evening, David Kapler, local resident, just a block away, which says something about why I live here. And I used to live out in May Valley, and during that time, the King County went through a process of community planning, and that included an area that's now much of the city of Newcastle, some additions to Bellevue, and parts of that planning area are now, a significant part of that area is now in the city of Issaquah. There was a lot of concerns at that time. City administrator, for one, was quite concerned about climate issues and some of those kinds of things, and growth, myself and others. And the Newcastle Community Plan came up with this concept that had been tried in other parts of the country of an urban village. The idea was we would have less roads, shorter roads to serve people. We would have shorter sewer lines, water lines, all of those kinds of things. We could then concentrate on the dirt on the ground that was most appropriate for development, and saved the ground, the water, the wetlands, if we avoid getting to that. The city of Issaquah adopted that concept that was basically outlined in the community plan, the county plan, and the developers that had Cougar Mountain said, okay, we can do it, we can make it work. And then when the Seahawks type people and all on Issaquah Highlands found out that the city could be pretty flexible and would go for some urban village or whatever you want to call it, they jumped in as the second one. But this was, nobody was doing this. Issaquah was way ahead of everybody else on this, and let's continue to be way ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the room who would like to speak? Seeing none, clerk, is there anyone online who is indicating interest to speak? Okay. Well then, with that, we will close this session of public comment, and we will move on to our first agenda item, which is COM 0225, the Economic Development 2026 Work Plan. And I would like to invite Alexis Fitzsimmons, Economic Development and Housing Manager, to give the presentation.
There we go. Sorry. Good evening. I'm excited to talk to you about our 2026 action and work plan for the economic development activities. Our economic development action plan has 3 objectives, and that was established a few years ago in coordination with the Economic Vitality Commission. Access to opportunity, to convene and catalyze, and leverage Issaquah's assets. Those are the plan's objectives, and everything that we do in our economic development activity really is surrounding those objectives. Our focus and our work plan areas are business and economic vitality, housing development, communications and engagement, and workforce development. Those 4 topics, kind of underneath those 3 activities, encompass the work that we're doing. We focus on business retention and expansion, attraction and development, downtown and commercial district support, and outdoor recreation under our economic vitality and business development. Our housing development is one of also my main focuses, with builder and developer and property owner outreach, as well as affordable housing strategy and implementation. For communications and engagement, this one is I find particularly important because no one knows your story unless you share it. And I've worked with several communities that have a case of poor mouth where a lot of residents and a lot of city staff speak negatively about the community. And that may be because they don't necessarily know what's going on in the community. However, Issaquah is different. There's a very positive attitude in Issaquah generally, in the citizenry, as well as with public officials, and it's really important that we continue to engage with that and continue to share the Issaquah story in a positive way so that our community has positive things to talk about. And so when we have things like new business openings and we want to share those things. One of the things that we do is have the Issaquah Buzz podcast that Autumn and I co-host. We have a monthly ED newsletter. We have quarterly city council reports to share with you guys what's going on. In addition to that, we have additional community engagement with our community partners so that we can understand better what's happening on their end and how we might collaborate and share the story further. That particular item I find very important, even though sometimes it may be less on the priority because it's not necessarily so strategic, it seems. Workforce development is something that I also believe that we should be focusing on. This year we have been collaborating with the Chamber on their Great Careers Day that they held. Also, I sit on the Issaquah School District CTE Committee, the Career Technical Education Committee. And I also participated in senior exit interviews at the high schools this year. It's really important to continue to engage with our young people as well as our workforce to make sure that the businesses that we have in Issaquah have a ready workforce, not just in Issaquah, but in the region to pull from as we move forward. So let's go a little deeper into what we're doing on the business and economic vitality. One of the things I mentioned was business retention and expansion. Our goal this year is 30 visits. As of the beginning of May, we had 19 complete. This does include ribbon cuttings, but in that 19 number, there was only 5 ribbon cuttings at the time. But the purpose of these visits is to keep your finger on the pulse of how your business community is doing. What we want to do is to make sure that we have good established relationships with businesses in the community, so that way if there is an issue that comes up, they know who to call and how to get hold of us. We want to make sure that they know that the city is supportive of their operations and that we're here to provide resources, and just generally understand what their operations are so that we can advocate for them on different levels of government for our business community in Seattle, in our Issaquah community. We have had leveraging our community organizations and partnerships like the Chamber to gain access to businesses and introductions to businesses that we might not necessarily have easy interactions with. And then also we held a spring open house in April. It wasn't super well attended, but I believe it was the 3rd open house that we've had historically. I was hoping for a larger audience. We had 30 RSVPs. We had about 10 businesses show up, but we had several community partners as well as city departments come to provide information to those that did attend. Another thing that we do under the Business and Economic Vitality umbrella is support Startup 425, which is a collaborative initiative that includes Bellevue, Kirkland, Redmond, Renton, and Issaquah. We do monthly networking walks. You might see us once a month walking through the downtown and utilizing the Rainier Trail with entrepreneurs. It's kind of a walk and talk event, and we have an opportunity to casually interact with our entrepreneur base here in Issaquah. And you can see we always stop by Jacob Two Trees and take a picture. Our crowd varies between 3 to 7 people at any given month. But we've met a lot of great businesses that we would not have otherwise realized were home operating in our community, out of their homes with software and businesses that they're kind of getting off the ground. And through that, we've been able to connect several businesses to the Startup 425 Accelerator, where they've been able to learn about resources and tools and grow their businesses through that educational program. We also hosted an entrepreneur networking panel at REI earlier this year. And The accelerator is currently in cohort 4, and another cohort will be starting in the fall. Homegrown retail is another program under this Business and Economic Vitality umbrella. We have 8 businesses participating this year. We had 12 applications. We worked with Kelly Diane at Pickering Barn to establish who was going to participate and choose those. They participate in one, each business has a spot in the May timeframe, and they also have a spot in the September timeframe. And the way that it works is, they come, we provide the materials, kind of removing the risk from the business to try and reach their customer, so they don't have to invest in a tent or tables or signage. We provide the spot, and they show up and they learn from their customer about what their customer wants, who their customer is, work out some kinks, maybe get some sales, and then come and take that back, modify their approach possibly from what they've learned from those interactions, and then come back in September and try it again. We've heard really great feedback from those businesses that have been able to take advantage of this, and so we hope to continue this program into the future. Another thing that we have under the Business and Economic Vitality umbrella is our downtown and commercial district support. I want to pay special attention to the downtown and commercial district support tonight, because we also have the Downtown Issaquah Association presenting after me. One of the things that I've put extra effort into as I've joined the city in September is to really work on creating a collaborative partnership with our community partners, especially the Downtown Issaquah Association. Together we have hand-in-hand collaboratively moved forward in establishing a good relationship, a good working relationship, and I feel that this has been a very productive year for us so far. One of the things that we have been collaborating closely on is the Front Street closures that are going to be happening in August, every weekend in August. From 8 a.m. on Saturday to 10 p.m. on Sunday, Front Street will be closed between Dogwood and Sunset. In partnership with DIA, we've been able to collaborate with the businesses to get their to help them get their things together to be able to apply for the LCB permit, to also schedule programming, to make sure that these events are, pedestrian friendly, family friendly, and really provide some increased vitality for the old town. Another thing that's been happening in the area, which I know that you're aware of since the trolley was here for extra funding last month, is the work that we're doing to increase the trolley operation. Kind of an update on that is the track and the trestle has been inspected and has been found the track needed some repairs, but those are underway, and the trestle was found to be sound for operation, so the trolley will be able to run from start to the entirety of the track that we have available. And so that's good news. The downtown, or the Issaquah Historical Museum is continuing to work towards the programming for that. They did hire a program manager, and they're working on volunteers and training and all those sorts of things. Everything that's required to make that be an executable plan. The Creative District also is in week 7, or has completed week 7 of Art Up, which is a creator workshop for art creators. And it's basically a workshop where creative businesses learn how to do business things. Creative businesses are typically really good at being creative and making their art, but maybe not necessarily at the business side of things. So this Art Up, done by the Creative District, is an opportunity for them to better understand what needs to happen in order to support their business side of their art. And that has been very successful. The upper left picture is that has Allie Marcus in it, is the group of creators that are participating. As far as outdoor recreation and tourism goes, Economic Development oversees or works with the LTAC board We've already gone through one funding cycle for LTAC this year, which you guys have reviewed and approved. However, we went back to LTAC on Monday last week and asked for them to open the funding round a second time. And so the application for LTAC another application for LTAC funding will be opened, I believe, June 12th, and will stay open for 30 days. And then we'll have a special meeting in July to review the applications and make awards. And that will come back to council for approval a second time. In addition to that, we work closely with Visit Issaquah on their activities and the tourism activities. We're working closely with them on the Aircraft Festival, with the hang gliding and art festival, which you can see in the upper right-hand corner. I recently partook in some hang gliding, which was a wonderful experience, and I really enjoyed it. I will probably do that again. So we're super excited about the partnership with Visit Issaquah and the work that's being done to make this a marquee event for the city. We really believe that it has the opportunity to have a lot of growth year over year. In addition to that, we're hoping, I know that the city as a whole is reviewing its artificial intelligence policies and the use of those types of tools for monitoring people that come in and out for the purposes of tracking tourism and that type of thing. We're hoping that maybe we'll be able to get a tool that will be able to better illustrate the activity, tourist activity that comes in and out, and being able to tie it to the different events that gives a little bit more concrete evidence of how those events perform and how we might be able to tweak our schedules and events to be able to better take advantage of regional opportunities. Moving on to housing and development. As I said previously, this is a major focus for myself in the Economic Development Office. I'm working in concert with our community planning and development staff to ensure that the city is providing a predictable and efficient process. This has been a labor of love for me. It's been a learning curve. Housing is not something I did previously before coming here, so I've really enjoyed learning how all the housing mechanism and affordable housing is done here in Washington and in Issaquah. We've had two events where we've hosted builders and developers, one on February 26th and one on April 1st. And we also had we participated in the Master Builders Association breakfast, where Mayor Mollett provided a presentation on all of our desires to engage and make changes and move forward in ways that are friendly to the builder community, but that still creates a sense of stewardship within the community. In addition to that, I've been attending NAIOP networking events. NAIOP is a commercial real estate, industrial, commercial space association, professional association. A lot of builders, developers attend those events and get education through that association. And so it's a great way to have a good concentration of people to meet with and talk with and share the Issaquah story, right? Like I said before, a lot of this housing development, one of the things that really needs to be addressed is the perception of what it's like to do business in Issaquah. And the perception isn't always great when it comes to building because there's so many challenges. And so when I go to these events and I talk with these developers, I talk to them about how active we are in listening to what needs to happen, and how active we are in making the changes. And that has been really well received. I've had a lot of great conversations at these events and had a few one-on-one conversations with developers individually after that as follow-ups. We also work closely with ARCH, of course, with the ARCH Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and as well as the Inclusive Housing Investment Pool, both of which I know you guys are aware of. This is something that we have touch bases multiple times a month, especially now that we're moving into the RFP for projects. This June is when we see ARCH advertise their request for proposals for affordable housing projects, and our IHIP program is also advertised at that same time. So I believe that will be starting on the 17th of June. So we're hoping, we're working closely with them to refine that RFP for the purposes of for IHIP, as well as, trying to uncover opportunities in the affordable housing space. Community engagement, again, a really important part of what economic development is about. Again, we do this through the Issaquah Buzz, the Economic Development Newsletter, Economic Vitality Commission, our advocates and ambassadors for the city. We have a whole menu of people that sit on commissions that are our ambassadors, and the Economic Vitality Commission is special, and that's because they have a very in-tune skill set. They come to the table with knowledge of economic development and business, and they can take that and speak positively, not just to the general community, but to the business community that they're very in tune with. And so they are a very important commission within our city as a result. We also interact with the Highlands Council. We put a article in the Highlands newsletter. Also, again, we had the spring open house, business open house. Workforce development. As I mentioned, this is also a very important thing for the community as we move forward to retain our businesses, making sure that they have a pipeline of workforce coming out of our school districts and out of our community colleges, retaining our young people and young entrepreneurs and young workforce. Those are all really important. We work closely with the Port of Seattle, who also has a new focus on workforce development. They hired a workforce person new to their office in the fall. And then also, again, with working with the school district. And this is my last slide. I just kind of wanted to overview how some of our economic development activities were funded. In 2025 and for 2025 and 2026, we received an $83,000 grant from the Port of Seattle, which we had to match locally, $41,500. I did receive questions from council regarding kind of the breakdown of what that goes towards, and I did respond by email, so you have those in your inboxes. But it's broken out, basically how our work is broken out. And when the grant was applied for, which was before Jack and I's time, there's three sets of projects that we have it broken into. Small business technical assistance, retention and expansion, and tourism. With the small business and technical assistance, that's where the money from Startup 425 comes from, which is about $45,000 a year. The business retention and expansion program, there is significant funds left. I would say about $40,000-ish for the remaining part of 2026 to spend. Tourism, we supported 2 outdoor recreation events. So in 2025, the Tiger Claw Run was supported for their marketing. They did some marketing that was tied with the city and gave us marketing material that we could utilize on our channels and sites. And then this year, we are working with the Aircraft Festival to do the same type of thing, to provide marketing support that's co-branded that we can utilize as a city to advertise, as well as they can use for their materials as well. So with that, that's my last slide. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Great. Looking to see if there's any questions from council. Councilmember Adair.
Yeah, my questions, some of them are kind of follow-ups to the email, which I really appreciate your email back, as well as this great, presentation breaking this all down, is kind of the thoughts, of kind of next steps. Because you brought up kind of 2 areas, where you guys have been having these conversations with different groups, both, in terms of different businesses in town, as well as for housing and development, and then what plans are, or what's kind of the thoughts on the next steps to kind of accommodate, some of that input you've received. So for the 2 kind of primary areas I had was, my question on our business sectors and things like that, and how we kind of keep our economy diverse in some of the areas where you pointed out that we might have further growth. What sort of actions we think we might be able to take place to help encourage those other types of business to set up here and grow. And then similarly on the housing and development side, you brought up kind of what they talked about as like the most impactful policy changes, and kind of I believe we already are having discussions there, but I just kind of wanted to, bring up what work we're doing kind of for the next steps to bring in that input and help our city grow.
Sure. So let me start with the housing. We're going to continue to have the business or the builder roundtable conversations throughout this year. Our next one is going to be scheduled in July. Continuing to work with the Master Builders Association to coordinate those, as well as the developers that we've already worked with. However, this next focus for the next Builder Roundtable will be on the nonprofit sector. That's not something that we really delved into in the first two sessions. It was more of a, what is some low-hanging fruit? What changes can we make, and how and when can we make them to our permitting and our zoning and that type of thing. This next one, I really want to focus on, what challenges does our nonprofit sector of builders have, and how can we adjust or remove some of those barriers to get more activity from them, not just the market rate developers in our community. So we'll provide a update on action and what we've done to the builders at that time, but as well as continue the conversation throughout the year about those topics. So it will be continuous engagement with the builders, and also continuous engagement with that community through NAOP and that type of thing. Next step on that front is just to continue to make those changes. CPD has a very detailed work plan that they're working on, and that's I'm kind of out of my depth when it comes to talking about zoning and permitting process, but I support them throughout that process as needed, and they're continuing to trudge forward on those very important changes that will make a big difference in the way that we're perceived as a community and the way that it feels to do business here as a developer. As far as attraction and retention, about 80% of a community's growth comes from the retention and expansion of their existing businesses. And so that should be a very big focus for our department, and it continues to be. That being said, there are significant challenges within the community, just like there are with housing. We have the same types of challenges when it comes to attracting businesses. Land is a finite resource, and we don't have greenfield properties to market to extremely large projects that are going to build really large buildings to house hundreds and hundreds of employees, right? So we need to leverage infill redevelopment. We need to leverage our organic growth businesses, our small business sector, where we can kind of grow them organically and keep them here. There are opportunities for the city to grow and attract, but they're not going to be the big sexy projects that all the time, like the Costco expansion. Those aren't going to happen every year, right? That's not a thing. There are, when we talk about a attraction pipeline, so just to kind of pull from previous experience, in 2024 in Licking County, we had about 100 projects that we could compete for. We had the opportunity, we had the properties and the acreage, the utilities, the capacity with our water and sewer to respond to about 60 of them. We got site visits, actual companies coming to Licking County on about 5. We landed 2. So of all the projects, it's about filling the funnel. And how do you fill that funnel of opportunity? You do that by becoming a prepared community and addressing, I don't want to say warts, but addressing the issues that you have as a community, whether it's workforce, whether it's transportation or infrastructure or land scarcity, removing those barriers. If we are a prepared community, when the right opportunity comes along that fits Issaquah, we will be ready. So it's important for us to continually address those issues that we have as a community to be ready for the opportunities when they come along. That's not saying that we won't continue to seek out those opportunities to engage with Greater Seattle partners or, to some extent the Port Authority when those opportunities come along. But we need to be a prepared community, and that comes with addressing the challenges that we have first.
Any other questions? Councilmember Joe?
Thank you. I had a question about the summer Front Street closures that'll be going on weekends in August. June 21st, of course, we have our Fenders on Front Street on Father's Day. My question is, what can the citizens look for during those street closures? Will those streets just be closed? Will there be programming for the city? Will there be other organizations doing programming? Can you give us a little flavor for what's going to be happening on those weekends?
Sure. So like I said previously, we are working closely with DIA on programming. There will be opportunities for programming from partner organizations like the Boy Scouts, as well as some other businesses that aren't necessarily food providers that are coming and bringing their business out into the street. There's opportunities there. DIA also has some programmed events that are happening during those closure times that will be producing, more feet on the ground, more pedestrians in the area. We don't have a specific calendar of events currently, or vendors, or lists of buskers and art people just yet. But that's something that we're working closely with DIA on.
Thank you. When David Kapler and I were on council together, we developed some rules for Salmon Days, talking about First Amendment restrictions or restrictions on organizations going through there with big billboards advertising either campaigns or religious items. Will there be a free speech area that will be cordoned off like we have at Salmon Days, or will it be a situation where those organizations might have an opportunity to go up and down Front Street without restriction? And has there been any thought to that? If not, that's okay. I'll just plant a seed with the administration to think about how that might be handled, as sometimes these events, if they're known, do attract some elements that want to have their message out there.
I appreciate you bringing that up. I am going to err on the guidance of DIA's expertise on that. They host a lot of events as well, and I think that they can probably guide us well on where and how we might put that into implementation if it's needed, if there's a space there.
Councilmember Boyd?
I have two questions, if that's okay. So my first one is, if you could, can you tell me a little more about the intersection of the homegrown retail program, and then is there any kind of pathway for if something is really successful and takes off, they're then connected to, if we keep a list of the vacant retail and commercial spaces that are here? I guess, can you go into detail about that at all?
Sure. I didn't quite catch the first part of the first about what you said about the homegrown retail. You said, can you tell me about the what between the homegrown retail?
Just if there's any connection between, if someone's really successful within the homegrown retail program, they're ready to take that next step, launching their business. Are they provided connections to vacant space in town, or?
Yeah, okay. Yes, so we have a platform called CoStar that we utilize. Some of what the port funding goes to is the CoStar program, or the CoStar platform that we utilize to look at the market, what's available, and do kind of research. One of the biggest challenges that we have right now is the availability of commercial space in Issaquah, specifically 5,000 square feet and less. A lot of inquiries about space that has a plug-in ready kitchen, and things like that. A lot of the vendors that are utilizing the homegrown retail are food-based, and so a lot of times those types of businesses will graduate, if they're a catering or a sauce or some type of snack like that, they'll graduate to a kitchen that can be shared, like a commissary kitchen type of situation where they can rent space. And there are some of those in the region, but they're pretty booked. There's not a lot of available restaurant space available. And so that's one of the biggest challenges that we have. And when that stuff does come on the market, right now, Blazing Bagels, we're waiting with bated breath for it to be available so that we can tell people that you need to go and run to get that lease because it's going to go fast. We keep an eye on what's available through that CoStar and also conversations with DIA because DIA has a really great pulse on what's becoming available downtown and what might be coming up for like leases are expiring or businesses are moving or that type of thing. So it's a combination of community partnership as well as the technology that we utilize through CoStar.
Thank you. Can I ask one more question? How is equity factored into who is when you're reviewing the applicants for the homegrown retail program?
I would say that we look at the preparedness of a business as well as the mix of applicants and is it designed to be in a farmer's market type of situation. So some businesses don't necessarily have the type of product that sells well at a farmer's market. And also, where's their business located? Are they residents of Issaquah? Are they in our region or are they coming from Seattle, right? We want to first allow opportunities for the people that live in Issaquah that are growing their business or that have businesses. And this past round, the exclusions that we made were for those that mostly were not Issaquah businesses.
Okay. There's no specific equity framework that you're following for that, though? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Any other questions? Not, I would like to ask a question piggybacking off the answer to Councilmember Boyd's question. So it seems like, commissary kitchens and smaller commercial spaces are a big need. Is there anything we can do to, attract a commissary kitchen developer to Issaquah?
Typically those are found in like incubator spaces, mostly, or faith-based areas. So a lot of churches have facilities that they can lease out or rent out to people because they only use it during certain events. They're very expensive to build, and typically when kitchens are built, they're built for a specific purpose with an end user in mind. So I guess my answer is, and I'm not sure because it might not pencil out for a developer to specifically build a commissary kitchen, but it's something that we can investigate.
Yeah, definitely. Could you talk a bit more about some of what these incubator spaces are? Because that seems like something, that could be of use to entrepreneurs more broadly.
Yeah, so there's lots of different types of incubators that exist, whether it's a technology type business incubator or like a food hall type incubator. One could consider Pike Place Market maybe an incubator, right? They have small spaces for small food vendors that could graduate to larger spaces once their brand grows. Or food trucks are a type of incubator. Lots of restaurants start in food trucks and then grow out of that into permanent locations. One of the things that was in the Port of Seattle grant kind of framework that was submitted as a part of the application in 2025 was a food incubator or a kitchen incubator type of place because of this exact need. Because of the extreme costs and the lack of space, there wasn't really a way for Jen Davis Hayes when she was here or us to really execute on that. It's sometimes up in the six figures to build that type of space out because of the equipment needed, the fire suppression, the health department needs and things like that. and finding the space to do it, the cost per square foot to purchase or lease that type of space, and then also put that type of equipment in there is a very big barrier to entry into that. Where I have seen it be successful is a non-profit type of situation where there is some type of food hall / market that operates as a nonprofit without a profit, format, so that they don't need to worry about that. They just need to worry about breaking even, right? And then give space opportunity to small businesses to lease out and have a food market type of hall. It's been very successful in several places in Ohio that I've seen do that.
Great, thank you. I mean, I personally love, sometimes when you go to other countries or other places where they have all these food courts, they have so much good variety of food, so I'd love to see that in Issaquah.
Yeah, I mean, places like the French Market in New Orleans, North Market in Columbus. I mean, there's lots of places that have these, places where businesses can start, get their feet wet, and then be successful and maybe move out to a larger space.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Any other questions? Seeing none, we will move on to public comment. Is there anyone who would like to make public comment about the Economic Development 2026 work plan? Going once, going twice. There's no one online either. With that, we will move on to council direction. Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you. As I was looking through the everything in this presentation, I feel like there are a lot of things that we are doing. I would really like to get into being very clear about what is and what isn't working and be willing to cut out the things that aren't effective. And when I look back, I kind of contrast what we're doing on housing with the business and economic vitality. The housing work seems to be very outward focused, where we're utilizing places where our target audience is already gathering so that we can amplify our message and learn in something that is kind of mutually beneficial to both sides of the equation. I'm not really seeing that type of work with the business and economic vitality. It feels more like onesie-twosie activities, joining with Startup 425 and having some smaller things, doing some of the business retention visits that I just don't know how effective those are compared to just being available and maybe having office hours when people could come in and visit us. I'm also not sure if we've hit the mark on the right type of event that meets the needs of our business community, the spring open house, the ED monthly newsletters. So I would like us to be able to look into some of that stuff, and I know a lot of this comes from before you, so this is a great opportunity for us to really take a look at what's effective and what we should be doing moving forward. I think we've heard a lot here. There's an interest in the homegrown retail, and I think I would add into what I've heard. I'd like to understand how we can help those businesses grow to that next step. I think there's opportunities we've seen around the area. Bothell has these pop-up retail stands. I would certainly love to see something like that, say somewhere around the Rainier Trail or something like that. But it feels like that is a potential area where we could explore some of those things. Workforce development is listed here. I'm not sure that should even belong to the city. I'm a mentor myself. I do a lot with the school district, but I'm not sure I see the ROI of this investment of time versus others as far as what's going to move the needle for workforce, business, the city, et cetera. And so I think I would say I would love to not only see a sense of what we are doing,
but what our next steps are and what we're not going to continue doing because it isn't working. So I think this is a great starting point for that. But as we look at our next engagement and kind of what we are doing over the next 6 months, I think that would be a great place to see us make some movement on. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other council comments? Oh, Councilmember Board.
I think my feedback is if there's a way to more explicitly tease out how equity is used in the approach in building the work plan, and even at the smaller, like micro levels of within each program, but just, overall, this is how it approached, or not every business in Issaquah, they all have like unique, diverse needs. And so I think I'd be curious to get that feedback and how we can adapt to the individual needs of some of our businesses.
Okay. Thank you.
And I think what specific communities are facing. I'm thinking of a business that recently closed, and I know some of the ICE activity that we're seeing, it might not have been the biggest factor in the closure, but it was a factor in some of their foot traffic, and so, or the population that was utilizing their services. And so that's my 2 cents.
Great. Thank you.
Any other comments? If not, I have some comments. Well, first of all, Alexis, I'm very envious that it seems like you got to go paragliding as part of your job. So it sounds like
did not.
Oh, okay. I thought I did. It did seem like it was part of your job as doing a business visit, which I was like, maybe okay.
No.
But
I wish.
Okay. Well, I'm still envious. I've never done paragliding, so maybe I should. I think this is a great start, and I also really appreciate, all the muscle and work that you've put into the housing aspect of things. I think we've really seen, a pretty big step change even in the last 6 months. So I think that's been really great to see. I agree with Councilmember Walsh that I think on economic development, I think for a long time we've kind of struggled to even put our finger on what are our goals, right? I think there's these tensions between, we have a regional growth center where we have an extremely aggressive target for job growth, but we also don't want companies that don't really fit with the vibe of Issaquah. So I think, that's kind of a tension that we have to navigate. And then on the piece on leveraging Issaquah's assets, I will say, I think one of the big assets that we have is that we have Costco's global HQ, and some of the big employers we've seen move into the area are, Costco's major suppliers. So I'm curious if there's anything, in regards to attracting higher earning jobs, if there's anything related to let's call up all of Costco's suppliers and see if they want to have a branch in Issaquah. I think that could, that could potentially be a thing. One of my neighbors actually works for a Costco supplier, but because they have to have so many warehouses, they have to be somewhere that's less expensive to, buy space. But I do think it is worth, exploring that as an option to attract more jobs, because it, makes sense for what we already have here.
It is. I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah, and I think overall, in general, I think we need to figure out what we're actually trying to do with economic development. I know we're kind of unique in calling it economic vitality versus economic development, and I think the economic vitality plan currently, and I know this wasn't developed under you, but it currently reads a bit like, we want to cultivate the vibes of Issaquah and attract nonprofits and artsy businesses, and it's like, okay, well, is that, the job of the city, or is the job of the city to, have a good mix of, jobs, including, some white-collar jobs and things like that. So, a lot to think about, and I look forward to continuing to work with you on this. Thank you.
And if I can just amplify a couple of points. The slide we happen to have up on the screen regarding the Port of Seattle grant, we anticipate that money going away next biennium. Certainly that there's been a question of that.
There's been a question of that. I did receive some additional guidance from the port, and they seem to think that might still go for a round of funding in the beginning of next year. So
because this money has been the only money that we have had to do anything other than staff. And so as we look at incentives to for businesses to either relocate here or develop here, The council would, I think, have to consider how much general fund dollars are you willing to invest in that. The interesting part about the Costco suppliers, our new city hall displaced 3 of them because there were 3 signed leases for the building on Maple for Costco suppliers. So the issue of space is real here, and we can do everything in our power to make Issaquah attractive for businesses, but if there is no place for them to locate, that's a problem. And so we're going to continue to do the good work that we're doing. I think one of the challenges is financial resources and property. And so with that, I think we have to show love, and I think that's a lot of what you've heard tonight, is that the businesses that are here we want to retain. We want to make sure that they do not leave. We also cannot lose sight that we have the 13th largest company in the Fortune 500 here, and I think oftentimes when we talk about economic development, we kind of put aside 6,000 jobs that are based here. We don't think about them a lot because they kind of keep to themselves and do their own good work, but they keep 3 hotels filled on almost a weekly basis. They have multiple businesses that are only here because they want to be close to Costco, working with Costco and making sure that they feel as a company that could be located anywhere in the world that they continue to be valuable. So I think as we talk about our challenges with economic development, we're always going to want to do more, but I think we cannot ever forget about the tremendous economic impact that Costco brings to this community. That, again, this region with Google and Amazon, certainly Redmond, what it's experienced with Microsoft, but those 6,000 jobs quietly here in our community are a major economic engine, and we want to make sure that the hotels are satisfied, that there are restaurants here, that there are places for those vendors. All those things happen and we don't talk a lot about, but because they are thriving and they are working well, that economic engine continues to hum. So I again, thank you, Alexis, for all your good work, but there's so many pieces we sometimes take for granted here that I wanted to just take a moment, Madam Council President Pro Tem, to refocus on how truly lucky we are compared to many of our neighbors.
Absolutely agree. I love Costco. We all love Costco. Best Fortune 500 company. Great. Well, seeing no other comments, I think we will move on to our next agenda item, COM 0277, Downtown Issaquah Association Operations and Potential 2026 Funding. I would like to invite Corby Kassler, Executive Director of the Downtown Issaquah Association, to the lectern for the presentation.
Can you hear me? Awesome. Thank you so much for having us here today. We're very excited to talk about DIA, put some perspective behind what we've been talking about in the previous comments. We also want to talk about Main Street and how that ties in with what Downtown Issaquah Association is all about. I did want to recommend that we talk about our board members today. I've got several in the audiences. I have President Christina Bruning, Vice President and Treasurer Marv Nielsen, Secretary Barb Mayfield, and Board Member Judy Eklund. We can go to the next slide. Strong communities are built on connections, and DIA serves as a springboard for bringing people, businesses, and local government together. By creating opportunities for collaboration, networking, and shared purpose, DIA strengthens relationships that might otherwise never form. For small businesses, the impact is especially significant. Entrepreneurs often face challenges competing for attention, resources, customers, and DIA provides a platform for amplifying their visibility, encourages collaboration, and connects them with tools and opportunities that support their success. DIA is a smart investment. This image is an infographic of our Main Street Tax Credit Incentive Program. There, you can see it. So I'll talk about that in more detail later because there's a lot of that fits in with our conversation today. Finally, the partnership between DIA and the city has high potential as a model for shared success. By staying mission-focused, continuing to be the voice of our businesses, and an equal economic development partner with the city, we can create a foundation for sustainable growth, proving that collaboration is one of the most powerful tools for combined success. Next slide, please. I did want to talk about a couple of things that I just want to make sure that we're all working from the same handbook. And some of the misconceptions could affect this conversation that we have today. First, to be clear, Main Street does not conduct audits of its communities, nor did the city pay for an audit. The report that you've read is from what is billed as a celebration of DIA's successes. It's a site visit that Main Street does with all its communities like every other year. And the summary is basically for the DIA leadership to make decisions upon. What you're reading is a recitation of what they heard. So that's what that is all about. It just puts a little slant a little bit differently. It's not a mandate to make changes, but to consider and ensure any change works for the organization's many constituents. Next slide, please. This also happens to be Main Street Week, a time to pause and share the successes of DIA, being part of both Washington Main Street and Main Street America. That gives us a lot of tools and best practices upon which to pull. The Main Street movement in Washington State is very strong, and it offers limitless potential for our communities to continue to innovate, adapt, and thrive. DIA is strong among Main Street communities and is often benchmarked for its work. The bottom line is that Main Street is a great framework from which to build custom local traditions and best practices. Next slide, please. These are the people who have made DIA the success it is today. They are also the eyes and ears, and they gather community input upon which to build our strategies and our work plan. This is DIA's phenomenal board and some of its advisors. These are the folks who care about downtown as much as I do, and they put countless hours into the governance, and really you won't find people more committed to downtown than this group of people. Let's dive a little deeper into how DIA creates connections. Next slide, please. Our environment has significant impact on our well-being. When we don't feel connected to our place and our neighbors, we experience negative impacts, and our physical health, our quality of life, and our shared resiliency is affected. Historic downtown is rife with possibilities in creating these community connections, and DIA is very intentional about how we activate downtown spaces so that everybody feels included. But perhaps one of the greatest ways that DIA fosters belonging is through volunteerism. And you'll see from, there were a couple of studies, one throughout Washington State and one in Issaquah about belongingness, and volunteers significantly higher scores on feeling a sense of belongingness. That's one example of connected. Our economic development programming also brings tens of thousands of people downtown. Now that's a lot of connections. Fenders alone brings 10,000 people. DIA volunteers, of which we have hundreds that are actively engaged, log more than 8,000 hours a year, a community investment that's valued at $300,000. Not only does our programming help them connect through volunteering, but by becoming strong business advocates themselves, they bring foot traffic to our downtown. Next slide, please. DIA bolsters small business. That brings us to DIA and what we do and mean to small businesses. I don't know how many of you know Glenn Quadros, but he's very, very much a cheerleader for DIA. This is his quote: "DIA boosts our business with every event, and they're always here for us. And if you believe our qualitative and quantitative surveys, then you'll know that he's in the majority." Next slide, please. There's a reason that every stump speech these days includes a reference to mom and pop. And the reason is small businesses are both the backbone of our communities, and they're also up against disadvantages that we talked about a little bit earlier. They're fighting for customers, and their pricing and tariffs affect them much more deeply than larger corporations. While Main Street's recent small business survey published just last month give us reasons to hope, Washington's small businesses are lagging behind national averages when it comes to confidence in the future. According to this data, and again, it was just last month, Washington's businesses continue to experience lower revenue and higher expenses for doing business, demonstrating that support now is more critical than ever. The good news is that small businesses that are part of a Main Street community are more resilient, and they also report having more confidence in its future. DIA downtown businesses have reported a doubling of their customers and during some of our events. During Vendors on Front, Glenn, in fact, and doubled it and was just blown away by the line outside his door. But DIA is also a champion of employer of local artists and craftspeople, providing an average of 2,000 selling hours otherwise might not have had. We also hire more than 500 performers every year. Next slide. Main Street and DIA represent both longevity and adaptability. From the potential to reuse and reimagine historic spaces to the impressive track record of reinvention through decades of economic and social change, DIA is a sound investment. I hope you had a chance to read the recent article about Northwest Playground equipment in the HHH, which is our regular monthly newsletter. But here's a quote from Chris. He's the president of Northwest Playground. It's a no-brainer, talking about Main Street Tax Credit Incentive Program. It's good for businesses and it's good for the community. It's a partnership that's good for both DIA and for us. If you happen to want to see the story, you can go to that link that's on that slide if you got it in your inbox. Next slide, please. This slide depicts the diversity of our revenue stream projected for 2026. The majority of funding comes from the Main Street Tax Credit Incentive Program, but grants are not far behind. We put a lot of work behind getting more grants for our programming. In fact, we're trending 17% up higher than we were in our forecast based on what we see in Main Street Tax Credit Incentive Program and in the grants that we're receiving. A couple of DIA programs bring in revenue, such as the Wine and Art Walk and Issaquah on Tap. But thanks to our community, we also have strong sponsorships and donations from our businesses. We see opportunities and models used by other Main Street programs. In some communities, business improvement areas or similar service contracts fund streetscape care. For example, Mount Vernon and Bellingham have agreements with their Main Street organizations to maintain downtown streetscapes. DIA provides similar services with our flower baskets and a lot of our design work, but we are not funded in this way. It's an opportunity to think about. Next slide. We would be remiss if we didn't mention all of our business partners. DIA has a robust infrastructure of businesses, volunteers, professionals, and community members. And these are just some of the businesses that contribute to DIA either through the Main Street program or through sponsorships or donations. We couldn't even fit them all on the slide. Every one of them is part of DIA. While we don't have a membership, we are composed of the businesses and volunteers that advocate for the mission because they believe in it and they believe in what DIA can accomplish. Similarly, DIA enjoys strong advocacy among residents and visitors. We conducted a survey to capture the voices of our advocates. What we wanted to do is look at who's advocating for us and who are the detractors, the people who really move the needle. When you say, do you want to do something in downtown Issaquah, it's either yay or nay, depending on what these detractors or these promoters say. In the middle, it doesn't matter as much because it doesn't affect people. But what we have is 92% of the people saying that DIA programming, they would absolutely recommend to other people that you come and go to downtown Issaquah and attend these events. That is strong word-of-mouth marketing. Listening is the most important phase in our planning cycle, and this is part of what we do when we start our planning is we do a survey. But we also include feedback from businesses from throughout the year and from the community from throughout the year. It's an ongoing process. We have program-specific surveys and an annual survey, and all of this feeds into the work in our planning that begins in September and then is approved by December and adjusted for continuous improvement by mid-year. You've already seen this slide, but mine's bigger. A DIA City partnership could bring similar results. I really believe in coming together collaboratively so that we can have people say, you need to go to downtown Issaquah, there's nothing like it. That's a place to go. We want that kind of word-of-mouth advocacy. We're delighted to work with Alexis. I don't know that I'd follow her to the top of Tiger Mountain, but we're looking forward to working very closely with her and with Jack. Next slide, please. Downtowns are economic engines that generate value for an entire community. A thriving business district creates jobs, attracts visitors, and stimulates spending, all of which contribute to the city's financial health. As local businesses succeed, tax revenues increase, providing the city with additional resources. This impact extends beyond the local level. At the state level, what they have found is that a Main Street community, for every dollar allocated for these initiatives, participating communities generate $1.58 in state tax revenue through increased economic activity these programs help create. DIA plays a critical role in this cycle of growth. By fostering a vibrant commercial environment, supporting entrepreneurs, and creating opportunities for economic activity, DIA helps strengthen both municipal and state revenues. Building a foundation of trust. This page lays out DIA's intent to focus on our joint mission with the city while considering the request to, 1, add Alexis to the board, and just so you know, that is included in our bylaws. We do have a city position in our bylaws since 2015. Implement a rotating governance model, and 3, to have input in our work plan and how it gets funded. The city administration is working on policy around rotating governance, and we have yet to see it. Generally, DIA's board agrees we need to have rotation. We like to see new blood, but when it's the best time for our community, not an arbitrary date that's assigned to us. We won't make a decision until we've seen the new policy. We want to make sure that we know exactly how it affects us when we do finally see it. Finally, work plan and funding allocation from the city. That will be a natural progression to our partnership and an outgrowth of trust. I believe we can get to a place through trust, through DIA being an equal economic development partner who is at the table before decisions are made. DIA and the city, by staying mission-focused, can accomplish remarkable things. DIA is always aware that we are the trusted voice for the businesses, and we really take that to heart. By staying mission-focused, we will accomplish remarkable results for them as well. We are committed to doing our part, to making the city partnership work within the construct of the mission and the values DIA has worked hard to ingrain into our culture. And one more slide. With that, I'm open for questions.
Great. Council questions. Are there any questions? Councilmember Adair.
I wanted to follow up on, well, the last slide in terms of like the city's request, it seemed to be saying you're waiting on the city to get back to you on stuff. So like in terms of the rotating governance and the work plan, like you don't have, exact plans for that and you're waiting on city information to provide that? Is that?
Yeah, so for the one request about having somebody on the board, that's already in our bylaws. The request about having a rotating governance, we haven't seen what that looks like. We don't really even know what that entails. So I know they're working on it. So as soon as we see that, the board will review it. And that ties in with the work plan and the decision-making and the work plan. So all of that is related.
Got it, okay.
Councilmember Nichols.
Yeah, follow-up question on the rotating board seat. Isn't that one of the recommendations from some of the prior reports or the prior Main Street accreditation?
It was part of the summary from Main Street, and it was based on the conversation they had with the city. So their recommendation was based on what they heard from the city.
So does Main Street recommend this as part of their governance policy?
They have a recommendation, but not a mandate. So they will say, yeah, you should rotate your folks, but it's up to you within your community to make your decision.
Okay. And then second question on the board seat. Is that a voting board seat that's currently in your board?
It is not. It's ex officio.
Okay. Is DIA open to a voting board seat?
We would have to take that to the board. It would mean a bylaw change.
Okay.
Great. Any other questions? Councilmember Boyd?
There was a number there about what's put back into the local or the economy with Main Street programs, but I think that was a number it was state data and not like our local. Are we tracking the local dollars?
We track local dollars with individual businesses who sometimes will say, I've had an increase in revenue, but they don't want to say the number. So what we do is we rely a lot on the state data to give us, and the state data has been fed into from all the local communities. Does that answer your question?
Oh. Great, Councilmember Dare.
Oh yeah, another question I remembered. You brought up a couple of your survey responses. How are your surveys run? Is it just within the DIA members? Is it a public online forum? Like how does you run your surveys to get that data?
The surveys for the programs we send to the people who are participants in the programs. The annual survey we send to, we have a database of 8,000 people in the Issaquah area, and we also put it on our social media. So it was wide open.
Got it, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, the next part of this is public comment. Is there anyone who would like to make public comment about the Downtown Issaquah Association operations and potential 2026 funding? Going once? Going twice? Okay, well, seeing none, the next item is council direction and comments. I see Councilmember Walsh first again. Go for it.
Thank you. Surprisingly, some of my feedback is kind of the same areas. So first of all, I will start out in saying I am very supportive of Dia, what you've done, you know, some of the areas that you've worked on. I very much appreciate and support the idea of reinstating the funding and those portions. But what I really want to challenge Dia on, same way I did with the economic development area, is just, can we figure out what's not working and not do that? You know, this again is a great overview, and I understand I'm a more senior city council member, and so I've known some of this stuff about you, and that isn't the case across the board, but I would really like to see which of your programs are generating the most sales from downtown businesses. What are you deciding to no longer do because the ROI isn't there? What are the goals and metrics you're aiming for? You know, I understand not every program that you do is going to be a Fenders on Front Street, but are there goals for a certain number of engagements, a certain number of businesses that were happy with what was going on? How do you measure your success on individual events and experiences? You've also focused on, you have many focuses that were listed there. You had advocacy at the state and national level, connections, and bolstering small business. It would be really great to see what percentage of your time and budget you feel like are going toward those goals. You know, do you treat them evenly? I think the other piece there is, you know, as I see Dia, is some of it is about building up events that support our small businesses in our downtown. The other is the kind of those business engagement visits and having a sense of the pulse on the ground. It would be great if you could talk about those two areas of work, what percentage of time and effort they are, and what do you think they bring back both to the organization, the community, and the businesses? Because I think that better exemplifies what Dia is able to do as boots on the ground, but it also allows for you to take a look back at the work that you're doing, what impact it's creating, and I think a good, healthy organization is always able to take a look back at what you've done and not do the same things over and over again because they are something that's been done in the past, but rather have metrics for events and experience and programs, measure your success on those, and call out the areas that aren't working as well so that you can make sure that you are always growing, innovating, and such. So I think on the next area, I want to see a little bit more details on the programs and better understand how you are able to innovate and move forward on things rather than doing the same things over and over again, so that we can see that we're being modern and adjusting to the needs of our businesses. Thanks.
Thank you.
Councilmember Dare.
Yeah, I want to also just, congratulate and thank you for all the work you've done on that. downtown is one of the reasons I moved here. I wanted a place that had a real sense of a town and a real center, and it was one of the things that when I got there, I was like, oh, this is the place I want to be. And I know that that is thanks to you, Dia's work, and the city's work for so long. And so I do think that whole area is very important to us. But I do want to echo Councilmember Walsh's comments in terms of the how to keep moving forward, how to learn, and how to expand and bring in new ideas. And I do want to push back on the rotating leadership. And I know you said you're waiting on the city's request for it, and that also for Main Street it was just a recommendation. But I've worked with nonprofits and stuff before, and I think that idea is really critical to a healthy organization, because you can get, even though you're doing good work, can get entrenched or stuck in certain ideas, and there is never a right time to just like step down and hand off, and you kind of have to sometimes force the issue in order to have fresh blood coming in and have a very healthy organization and new ideas, because you won't see them until you're kind of in there. And I think and an organization, based on what I've read and stuff like that, that is so centered on you, like there's also the idea of just like what happens to you if you're in a car accident one day, that an organization needs a very robust and widespread leadership, and a leadership that's constantly changing in order to live on and be something that lasts 100 years. And so I do want to encourage that, with or without a city mandate, that I do think that's important for any nonprofit or any organization like this. And urge you guys to set up that kind of system, because I do think that is very important. And then that ties to those other comments of it forces you also to continually look at what you're doing and how to do it better, and just bring fresh eyes to it. So that's what I would encourage on my end.
Thank you.
Any other council comments? Seeing none, I have a few comments. So while I was listening to this presentation, I did download the Main Street America board guidelines from their website. So on page 20 out of 66 on this, there's a section on board structure. I'll read a couple parts of this. So diversity and inclusion, it says a healthy board mirrors its community, consider board members of different races, ages, genders, and economic backgrounds. When voices from across the district are represented, the board makes better, more inclusive decisions. So, something to consider. And then I think size and composition, it talks about recruiting members with different skills and representation from business owners, residents, nonprofit leaders, and local officials. So glad to hear that local officials will now be represented. And then I guess probably this is the most important one, terms and rotation. So Main Street America's recommendation is board member terms usually last 2 or 3 years and are staggered so that the board is a mix of new and experienced members. Many Main Streets limit board members to serving only 2 or 3 terms in a row. So I think, I'm part of a nonprofit organization that had to go through some governance changes in, the last few years, Issaquah Alps Trails Club. We also, for a long time, were very dependent on the contributions of one individual who I'm looking at right now. Hi, David. And I think we also had this situation where it's like, okay, if David Kapler were to win the lottery and move to Hawaii, what would we do? And that's not, now for me as a board president, a huge part of my role is to, recruit new board members, figure out a succession plan, et cetera. And, as a president, it's basically, we have 3-year terms, we're allowed to serve 2 3-year terms, and then you have to be off for at least 1 year. So now, former Councilmember Kapler is now off of our board. But still, getting involved in all sorts of different things. So I do think, that having rotating governance among the board officers is one key piece, but then also, bringing in new board members and having that cadence where board members have to step off, even if they've contributed a lot, just to get, new individuals into the organization is really important. The other thing that can sometimes happen is that, if you have a really large board, another organization I'm part of has a 60-member board, that becomes very unwieldy. And so, you obviously want to avoid that too. And so, if there's new people that you want to bring in, then it's important to have some kind of cycling to make sure that your board doesn't get to a point where it's just completely unwieldy. And so, to that end, I do think it's important for, Downtown Issaquah Association, which is such a critical part of our community. I mean, earlier I made a comment kind of poo-pooing like the economic development department's job as like cultivating the vibes of Issaquah, but that literally is the job of the Downtown Issaquah Association, right? All the events, vendors on front, all fresco on front this summer. I know everyone's very much looking forward to that. It is so important and a key part of what makes this community special. And so I want to make sure that, there's anyone who wants to get involved can get involved, and we have opportunities, whether it's through board service, volunteering, et cetera. So look forward to continuing to work with Corby, Christina, and the rest of the DIA team on how we can work together to make Old Town, Issaquah, and Front Street as amazing as possible. And Councilmember Boyd.
I think I'll echo some of the other comments here of I would love to just see more specifics. I can tell you the impact, Councilmember Adair mentioned that he moved here for the downtown. For me, I could share you like specific stories of events or the mini markets that happen at the Shell station when the Issaquah Farmers Market is not operating, but there'll still be a flower farmer there or some organic farmers. I can go there, pick up my flowers for my church duty that I have once a month. That's reliable. I'm sharing my specific story. So I would love to see specific data on, you've got that state data, but just, the return on investment that you guys, the programs you're doing and what you're putting into the downtown. And then and I understand it, that's data collection is it's work. You might not have, the staff or capacity to do that, but just best you can. I think anything's useful, and even if business owners don't want to share their specifics, I understand that, but, respecting their, whatever proprietary or privacy needs that they might have while still getting useful information, I think that would be really helpful.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Seeing none, thank you so much, Corby, for the presentation.
Thank you.
And we will move on to our last item, which is COM 0273, Issaquah Climate Action Plan Review. And I would like to invite Stacy Van McKinstry, Sustainability Manager, and David Reedy, Sustainability Coordinator, to the lectern for the presentation.
Thank you, Deputy Council Jang and members of the council. Again, my name is Stacy Van McKinstry. I'm the Sustainability Manager with the city and joined by David Reedy, our Sustainability Coordinator. I also wanted to acknowledge online, we have Sam Tarvin, our Solid Waste Analyst, in case there are questions on that part of the plan, as well as Emma, who was one of our interns from Gibson Neck High School. She supported a lot of the tracking of comments, changes that we were making to the plan, and development of the implementation work plan. Tonight is a follow-up presentation to what we shared with you all in May. During that meeting, we provided a lot of background information on the development of the 2026 ICAP. This evening, we're really going to dig into the content of the plan, present on targets for each of the focus areas to receive your feedback, as well as present on a number of actions that may benefit from further council discussion. Your packet did contain the draft ICAP, and we look forward to your comments on the content as well as next steps for the plan approval. So again, tonight we are seeking your input on that path forward for plan approval, as well as any specific feedback to targets and actions. Again, as mentioned in May, we provided a detailed summary of the process that we've undertaken to over the last 14 months to update the plan. As a reminder, we worked with a number of small committees focused on very specific topics, as well as met with PPC, the Parks Board, TAB, and the Environmental Board discussed the plan at just about every meeting over the last year. We've also worked really closely with staff from across multiple departments and held a few community events for input. This winter and spring, we met with the PDE committee for initial input. And all of these interactions and the feedback we received through the meetings, as well as our experience through implementing the current plan, have helped shape this plan update. So with that very brief overview and background, we really wanted to dig right into the targets that we are working and planning to work over the next 4 to 24 years to shape a more healthier and resilient community. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to David Reedy to talk through each of the targets.
All right, thank you all so much for having us here tonight. So tonight, as Stacy mentioned, we're going to be talking about the proposed targets in the 2026 ICAP update. These targets are ambitious, but we also believe that they are achievable at the same time. You'll hear me mention that a couple times tonight. Your input and on these targets is necessary as we shape our actions and budget requests to support our progress towards these targets moving forward. So, as we have shared before, one of the major changes that we're looking at for this ICAP update was the elevation of our greenhouse gas reduction target to a plan level target. The reason for this change is to anchor this target related to greenhouse gas reduction as the connecting point for other measurements throughout the plan. As you'll see in the next couple slides, most of the other targets are indicators of our efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions while also supporting co-benefits. The target itself has not changed, and this remains in line with our regional goals. As the overarching focus area has updated to overarching and municipal focus area, we have new targets specifically related and centered around the efforts the city can take to lead by example and address our greenhouse gas emissions in our operations. These targets were set based off of staff research, evaluation of peer jurisdictions, and discussions with implementing staff. These targets are difficult but achievable, and staff have been conducting studies and projects that will continue to set the city up to achieve these targets moving forward. One note here is that these targets were established to set the city up as a leader in climate action, achieving net zero emissions ahead of the community-wide goal. Additionally, I'll note that there are the second two targets on this slide have a target date of 2035 and are in line with our overarching greenhouse gas reduction target at the city level. And so if we are able to achieve those targets in fossil fuel use reduction for city vehicle fleet and in natural gas use at our municipal buildings, we'll be set up well to achieve our overarching greenhouse gas reduction target. The final target on the slide had previously existed in the building and energy section and was updated and moved to this section to reflect a more ambitious use of Puget Sound Energy's renewable energy programs. In the building and energy focus area, these targets address one of the largest sources of our greenhouse gas emissions at the community scale. Generally, these targets only had minor adjustments to try and clarify language, but the targets remain roughly the same and to align with regional commitments that the city has made. Additionally, our transportation targets address the second largest source of emissions at the city level. Two of the targets were unchanged, while one additional target, which includes a measurement of vehicle miles traveled based on population, has been added. These targets, again, are in alignment with regional goals like our K4C commitments. In the material and consumption focus area, no change has been made to the target as established in the 2021 ICAP. And one note here I do want to mention is that we have been trending in the right direction over the last couple of years, and that's been based on a lot of the great work that our solid waste team has been working on. In the natural systems and water resource focus area, the targets went through a much more intense change process. The tree canopy target was ultimately adjusted to reflect analysis by staff on potential planting areas in the city. The new target is both ambitious, pushing the city to prioritize tree canopy while remaining achievable based on this potential planting area that we feel like we have here in the city. This target in particular went through many discussions with the Environmental Board, ultimately landing at the target you see here today, and which the Environmental Board has expressed support for. As discussed before as well, we have added a target based on tree equity scores, which will help us consider the distribution of tree canopy across the city. And these tree equity scores are based on a number of different factors related to tree canopy, socioeconomic factors, as well as density as well. And we have 3 current census blocks that are below the 90% tree equity score goal as listed here. Finally, we added a target to align with the water use reduction targets in the water systems plan. This was included as the 2021 ICAP did not have any targets related to water use within the focus area, but there were multiple actions related to our water resource. And so this way, we're actually connecting the actions to targets within this focus area. And then finally, as we've presented on before, staff have proposed 2 additional new community resilience and well-being targets that are measurable through our biennial community-wide survey. This minimizes staff time to develop new measurement tools while providing insight into the resilience that the city and our community is building in the face of climate change. As mentioned, our previous ICAP target in this area was something that we did not feel like we could accurately measure. And so I think this is a really exciting opportunity for us to actually begin measuring our community resilience and well-being. And personally, I'm very excited to finally change our ICAP dashboard from measurement coming soon to actually start showing data. So throughout the ICAP update process, one of the focuses was to take another look at our targets. What we've landed on are targets that are ambitious and achievable. Many of these targets keep Issaquah in line with our regional efforts and our neighbor cities, while continuing to position the city as a climate leader. Succeeding on these targets will require consistent city leadership, creative solutions to known and likely some unknown challenges, and continued and expanded efforts at the utility, regional, state, and federal level. We have developed updated pages in the ICAP to specifically discuss our updated targets and highlight how we'll be measuring the implementation of the ICAP. Based on our targets, as well as other measures identified, we hope to be able to see our progress while understanding where we might be falling short, and therefore where we might want to be rethinking some of our implementation over the course of the ICAP implementation. Updates to targets and measures were made intentionally to report on meaningful progress and indicators while keeping staff effort to conduct these analyses to a minimum so that we can continue to focus on programs and projects that are going to help us achieve these targets. We intend to report out on our targets and measures as frequently as data allows on our ICAP dashboard, and I anticipate staff will continue to report on our progress regularly to City Council via reports. So finally, to support progress towards these targets, we're proposing a set of 61 actions that we will implement over the next 10 years. I'm going to hand it back to Stacy now to talk more about the development of these actions and highlight a few actions specifically for council review.
So as we had previously mentioned, originally we approached the ICAP update anticipating making a few revisions to a few actions and maybe revisiting a target. However, based on our conversations with the community, boards, commissions, committees, we have ended up touching almost every action in this updated plan and making revisions that we feel will really strengthen the plan. Our implementation plan that's included at the end of the ICAP does note how we plan to implement those actions as well as any changes made from the previous plan. The majority of actions we've applied a climate lens to them to make sure they're either helping us reducing our emissions or building our capacity to withstand climate impacts. We have also built in a lot of flexibility into the actions so that over the next 10 years, we can adjust our programs and projects to really ensure that they're informed by best practices. As David talked a bit about, we are changing how we measure the impacts and how we report. Our measures will reflect multiple actions that will really help streamline our process. so that we can focus more on implementation and cut down on the overhead needed for reporting. So next, with that brief overview of the actions, we are going to move into reviewing a subset of actions. We have 6 actions that we wanted to touch on tonight. Those fall under the land use and transportation, buildings and energy, natural systems, and overarching focus areas. The reason we are highlighting these 6 actions is because they may involve a new policy. These might be a policy that could have more impacts on our residents, our businesses, or other members of our community. Some of the actions may we have a bit of a question about the city's role and our ability to advance that action if it's appropriate to be included in our plan. So we will walk through each of these, but one thing I did want to note with any policy that's proposed in the climate action plan, we would not advance those policies without extensive analysis before they even come to council. So you will see some repeating language within each of the language of those actions. So the first 2 we'll talk about are under transportation and land use. The first one, to review the full language of this action, is evaluate the feasibility and impact of removing parking minimums or creating additional parking maximums to encourage multimodal transportation for multifamily buildings within a defined distance of major transit stops and in regional growth centers. There's some additional details on what a study should consider based on feedback from Environmental Board and PDE. This action received some positive or some mixed feedback, I'd say, from TAB. Some members of TAB were supportive, others were concerned about some of the impacts that could come from reducing parking minimums. PPC also had some concerns about spillover parking, but we did have support from the Environmental Board to move this action forward. The next action was around assessing the implementation feasibility for increasing requirements for EV charging capable or ready in a new multifamily building that exceeds state requirements and could be up to 100% of parking stalls. We would also want to assess any unintended consequences from moving forward a policy such as this. In general, we had support from TAB and the Environmental Board. This is based on recent passage of a similar policy in Redmond. PPC did have some concerns around grid capacity for EV charging as well as added costs for developers. The next policy moves into the building and energy focus area, exploring the feasibility, impacts, and implementation pathway for an ordinance that would require energy efficiency standards at the time of replacement or new purchase for heating or cooling equipment. This policy did receive some concerns from PPC because of potential increases in costs for this type of equipment. The Environmental Board did support this action as one of our major opportunities to work with existing residential properties on reducing emissions. The next policy, also within the buildings and energy focus area, is exploring feasibility and potential impacts of expanding the Title 18 code to include an expansion of dark sky ordinances for reducing energy use and help build resilience for wildlife. There was particular interest in ensuring that we looked at any impacts to safety and recreation through any change in lighting code. This recommendation came from the Environmental Board. They wanted to see in the city take additional efforts to reduce light pollution. They want to ensure that light is not having impacts on any migrating species and also the benefits from energy savings. There were some concerns expressed by PPC, specifically if we were focusing on commercial properties and any potential impacts to safety. The next proposed action is looking at exploring the feasibility and an implementation pathway for programs that reduce localized air and stream pollutants. There are a number of potential examples provided by the Environmental Board, one being a no idling policy, traffic reduction, or looking at regulations around electric landscaping equipment. Again, this one came from the Environmental Board. There are no specific policies proposed here, and it's more of a number of concepts that the city could explore over the next 10 years. The Environmental Board supported moving this one forward to address those local air and stream pollutants. And then our final policy the final action with a potential policy that we wanted to bring forward this evening is one around identifying opportunities and partnerships for acquiring potential timber sales or entering into agreements to protect trees and reduce the amount of timber harvested on public and private lands. This was an action that was proposed by the Environmental Board to look at new opportunities where the city could increase tree canopy. There are some concerns expressed from staff on whether or not the city would have jurisdiction to take on an action or policy like this, which is the reason we wanted to raise it tonight. That was a lot of information we presented on targets and actions. We wanted to pause here before we move into our current status of the plan, as well as next steps we have for the plan, and take feedback, questions, concerns around any of the proposed targets or actions we've shared tonight.
I'm looking for questions. Councilmember Dare.
Can you tell me a little bit more about Redmond's EV parking stalls policy? Because I just don't know what theirs is and how since that seems to be what we're thinking about modeling.
Yes, absolutely. And we can provide, I'm going to go off memory, so we can provide more details over email. But I believe it was last summer went into effect 100% EV ready charging in all new multifamily development. What we have, and part of the justification for that, it is much less expensive to put in EV charging infrastructure while a building is under development versus coming back and retrofitting that. The discussions that we had with the PDE committee was looking at a policy that would be probably less than EV ready, that might do some of the initial work for preparing for additional EV charging stalls, and also evaluating whether or not we'd want to go up to 100%. Maybe it's just a slight increase over the state, the current state requirement. So we'd want to look at all those different options. But I think the feedback we heard from Redmond was they did not hear concerns from the development community, and in general there was support for moving this forward. We can follow up with them and kind of see how implementations happened over the last year.
Any other questions? Councilmember Joe.
Thank you. I probably should have asked this earlier when David was making a presentation, but updates to targets, natural systems and water resources focus area targets. We had a 55% tree canopy by 2035, and it looks like we're taking it down to 53% tree canopy if someone were to just look at this by 2050. But can you comment on how changing this enhances our tree canopy, or at least makes it a better measure for us in the future? Right? We're not really reducing it by 2%, in fact, are we? We're kind of enhancing what we're doing? Or? Yeah.
Yeah, so this target took almost a year to negotiate with the Environmental Board, input from our urban forest manager, discussions with the park board. I think there was some hesitancy to drop back from 55%, but through really great data provided by Dan, showed that we don't have the land available to get to a 55% tree canopy. Hence, one of the actions around looking at some innovative partnerships was added in. What Dan and I think part of David's analysis did show is that with a lot of innovation, really planting every plantable space, we could get to 53%. However, it takes 10 to 15 years for that canopy to grow. So if we can do the 150 acre planting over the next 9 years, we believe we could then reach that 53%. So it was supported by some of our community advocates and the Environmental Board and our park staff as a very, still ambitious, it's going to push us, but we think we can achieve that with what's available.
Yeah, I think the other two pieces that I'd add is achieving a 53% tree canopy cover means expanding where we are planting, but it also really relies on us maintaining our existing tree canopy as well. And so I think part of this adjustment is recognizing the amount of work that is going to take to maintain existing tree canopy, especially when we're also talking about the growth of Issaquah and additional development. I think the other piece kind of influencing this a little bit is, when the 2021 ICAP was passed, there had been a jump in our tree canopy cover over the previous 10 years. And since then, as we've been continuing to measure our tree canopy cover, we've been kind of staying pretty stubborn at 51%. And so I think part of this adjustment was an intention to see again what we can ambitiously do, but also get a little realistic around kind of what is actually possible within our area, and then also given the other demands on our space in the city.
Thank you. To follow up on the 150 acres that you're going to be planting under this goal, is it fair to say that most of the acres that we'd be planting would be in public spaces and street trees and other trees that wouldn't necessarily be placing an extra burden on private property owners, but would be putting the right tree in the right place in public spaces?
Yes, I think from the city projects would be planting trees in public spaces, right-of-ways, things like that, and then would be also leaning on programs like our tree giveaway and some other programs to support the correct planting of trees on private property as well, and using kind of those tools to support that expansion.
Okay, thank you. My next question concerns tree equity. That doesn't mean we're doing Japanese maples or specific Chinese trees, right?
No, it is.
All right. That
different.
Can you talk about tree equity in terms of, in the context of the tree deserts that we see in some communities or in South Seattle, and how we're trying to make sure that we have the right shade and the right amount of trees in each area so that people have an equal environment or an equal opportunity for the environment?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great comment and question. And so I think one of the things that we've seen in the environmental movement for a long time, right, is that oftentimes where trees are placed in a city, where tree cover exists, is not equal across a geographic distribution. And that can come from a whole host of different reasons. And in many areas, that can be attributed to things like redlining, that can be attributed to a disinvestment from public entities in certain parts of a city or a region. And so in South Seattle, for instance, you can look at tree density maps and see huge swaths of the city that are hotter and much less covered in trees than other parts of the city that oftentimes are much wealthier or have different demographics. Here in Issaquah, we are very lucky in that we have pretty good tree equity, quite good tree equity, really across all of our census blocks. Our lowest census block it's called 85% or 85 out of 100 tree equity. And there's 3 census blocks that are below that 90 threshold that we're looking to push ourselves to achieve. And so the goal is, again, to think about not just getting more trees anywhere we can in the city, but also thinking critically about where are those trees placed so that we can make sure that the benefits that people are seeing from trees, again, lower temperatures in the summer, better stormwater management, aesthetic beauty, rest, relaxation, beauty, things like that, making sure that that's available and accessible for residents across the city.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Councilmember Boyd?
At one point you mentioned some focus goals of emission reductions and then preparing for climate change. Can you speak to how the dark sky ordinance addresses those?
Yeah, great question. That was one we discussed quite a bit as it came up through a recommendation from our committees and environmental board. There is an energy savings from increased dark sky ordinance, as well as the aesthetic benefits. And then some of the arguments that have been made in terms of resilience or preparing for climate impacts is that the dark skies have a greater benefit for migrating species and for our bugs and insects, and that they will thrive when they don't have the light ambience throughout the evening.
Great. Any other questions? Seeing none, we will move into public comment. Is there anyone who would like to make public comment on the Issaquah Climate Action Plan? Seems like all the folks that would like to make public comment already made public comment. Okay, then we will move on to the last item, which is council direction, which is basically comments. So, looking to my fellow council members to see who would like to make comments. And if no one wants to go, I can go first because I have like this much notes. So first of all, I want to thank both Stacy and David for all the hard work that they've done on this plan. I know it's been like a process that's taken over a year, and also I want to commend you on, really taking into account the comments from the community, like 44 pages of comments from different commissions, and you've actually integrated a huge amount of them. So I really want to thank you for that. I liked David's comment on, the city should aim to lead by example in terms of, cleaning up our own house, decarbonizing our own operations. I think there's also a lot to be said about how our city can lead by example in terms of how we contribute to regional decarbonization. So one thing I've been thinking about is the importance of regional grid infrastructure. I was just reading the other day, Puget Sound Energy, in order to comply with the state law around having 80% carbon-free energy by 2030, needs to acquire over 1,500 megawatts of winter peak capacity. That is a lot. And if we don't do that, either they're going to have to burn more coal and gas, or they're going to have rolling blackouts. And neither of those are particularly appealing prospects. So we need to do our part to help enable that clean grid. Otherwise, we are going to see more coal, more gas, more carbon emissions, rolling blackouts potentially. And so, as we've been seeing what's been happening in neighboring jurisdictions, I do think it is important for us to say, actually, having grid scale batteries is a very important part of what we are going to do to tackle climate change at the regional, state, and national level. And I also think this, dovetails well with an award that Mayor Mullet recently received from the U.S. Conference of Mayors for the work that Issaquah is doing on resilience hubs. I do think the engineering is possible. If there's, a grid scale BESS, we can use it to, supply more resilience centers within Issaquah, and I think this would be a huge, huge benefit. Like, the size of those things is so much bigger than what we have at the senior center. We could be powering like multiple schools, and you could have like a really great resilience center. So I would love to see us explore that as a, climate action and resilience strategy. On EV charging, I've said this in the PDE committee meeting. I will say this again. I think, just based on my experience talking with builders and also PSE, it seems like the biggest issue with doing 100% EV ready is that then basically you have to have a transformer or electrical capacity at the property that is able to supply like 100 cars. And so given where we're at with electrical capacity in Issaquah, I think that can actually be a real barrier. So what I would personally propose is something that's an even lower level of EV readiness than EV capable, which EV capable requires that you have all the wires and you have to have a really big transformer. I'm calling this EV pre-wired, which is basically you have all the wires. So because a huge part of the cost is like, if you have to put it in later, you have to dig up all the concrete and then lay conduit and then put the wires. That is totally unnecessary. It is not expensive to put wires in the wall when you're building the building. So do that. You do not need to get an oversized transformer, but then, if you're going to put in more EV chargers, you can upgrade your transformer at that point. And I think strikes the right balance of what are the investments that are, crucial to make upfront that avoids thousands of dollars of costs later without necessarily, incurring costs or delays that are potentially even going to delay the delivery or the opening of a building. Like, this is what I've heard from the building official in Issaquah, is that they can't get electrical capacity for some apartment buildings. And so I really do not want to see that happen. So EV pre-wired. I also, I really like the tree equity score metric. I think focusing on, I think to your average person in the community, they will not feel a difference of 53% versus 55% tree canopy. You'll see and feel like what you're seeing in your community. So having that tree equity score across all census blocks, are there trees, is there shade? I think that's something that's going to be a lot more meaningful to people. Putting more trees on Tiger Mountain isn't necessarily going to make that big of a difference for people. I also really love David's comments on the importance of maintaining our tree canopy, and I'd love to see, some more maintenance. There's a lot of our street trees that have ivy on them that we should, organize some work parties to rip those out. Okay, sorry, I still have 5 more things, so hang in there with me. I really like this idea of the time of replacement energy efficiency requirement. I think it basically at this point, if you're putting in a new gas furnace, you're locking that in for the next 20 years, and that's probably the opposite of what we should be doing. I do think it is important to make sure that we're not putting an undue financial burden on anyone. So, with the Energize East Side, we have incentives available for, lower income folks making $200,000 or below. So I think that's a really good program to, and we want to make sure that that's well calibrated. I also think we should potentially explore whether that should be expanded to small businesses, because I know that some small businesses might, not have the resources to do an expensive heat pump upgrade. So want to see if we can expand that program there. I also really like the goals which have been included since the previous climate action plan around reducing vehicle miles traveled. I do think this is one of the biggest actions we can take because, transportation is a huge component of our carbon emissions, but it has to really, get out of just the climate plan and really make it into, all of our public works and transportation plans as well. Right now, the primary metric we're using for transportation plans is called concurrency or level of service, which is basically how quickly can cars get through intersections. While this is well-intentioned, something like 80% of Issaquah's traffic during rush hour is pass-through traffic. So what we're saying is we are prioritizing things that make it easier for people who live in Renton and Maple Valley to get through Issaquah quickly versus making it easier for people in Issaquah to get around town. And so I think we need to really take a hard look at, what metrics we're using to score our transportation projects. And I know that is a little bit outside of, your scope as sustainability, but just saying this is a thing that we'll want to look at. I think also one of the actions that was mentioned here is the importance of advocacy. So, there's a lot of things where it's okay, it doesn't necessarily make sense for benchmarking at the city level or a building performance standard at the city level, but a lot of things will have to be at the state level. And so I think, adding sustainability things to our to our state legislative agenda is really important. And, on the acquiring timber sales, honestly, that's something where we should be advocating to the state because they have Department of Natural Resources, they have a giant capital budget. Okay, finally, last thing. Stacy, I've mentioned this to you a bit, but basically in Ann Arbor, they have this thing called the Sustainable Energy Utility, which is essentially, if you're a local person within the city, you can subscribe to the local utility and they build solar panels and batteries on local homes, and you can basically buy, those locally generated electrons on your electric bill. And so that makes it so that it's really easy for residents to invest in local solar. So I think this is a cool idea. I also think it's probably not really a city thing, probably more of a county thing, but something to flag is something, we could also advocate for. So that concludes my remarks. I think Councilmember Nichols and then Councilmember Boyd.
Okay, thank you both for this excellent presentation. I really, really appreciate all the thought, the care, and the analysis that was been put in by both my fellow council members as this has come over multiple touches, all the staff, and all the community. I think most of our feedback from PD has been incorporated, as well as was referenced, the many, many, many pages of community feedback. I forgot the number, it was quite high, but I know that's a ton of work. And I only have one additional suggestion that hasn't come up yet, and that's to very enthusiastically second Deputy Council President Zhang's comments on figuring out how Issaquah can do its part to lean in on more green energy infrastructure, specifically grid-scale battery storage. I also want to reference former Councilmember Kapler's comments on how Issaquah has historically and should continue to lead. I think it's a great tradition that we have in our city, and it's something that we see all over the place and that we should really lean into when we can. Our current climate action plan does touch on battery storage at a small scale, and we do it well. I want to appreciate that. We promote storage financing for homes and businesses. We put it on our own city properties. We also back it up at critical facilities like cooling centers, resilience hubs. This is all great, and I want to make sure that we keep that focus on those small scale things and continue that. What we don't yet explicitly do, though, is seek storage at the scale that the grid really needs. And those massive numbers the Deputy Council President mentioned, those are real. Our region needs to support those at some point, and I think Issaquah can lean in and help. And that's a gap that I think we should consider figuring out how we can utilize our climate action plan to help close. There are a lot of advantages that we can get from grid scale battery storage if we lead, like local prioritization for blackout prevention. The bomb cyclone outages are still fresh in many of our minds. Engineered correctly, we can get some good local benefits from these systems. And we can also show an openness to solutions that have to happen somewhere. These things do have to come someplace. So if we lead, we can find partners that will also meet the high safety standards that we're always going to have to insist on as well. I want to think a bit about the analog to light rail here. In that light rail, this is an area where I've seen our community really proudly stand up and say, yes, we want this in our backyard. We want to see these benefits ourselves, and we want to do our part locally and regionally to make those benefits happen. With climate-friendly infrastructure like battery storage, I really believe in our community, and I think we can take a different direction from some of our neighboring cities and task ourselves to have the courage of our convictions and say yes in my backyard to sustainability broadly and here as well. So once again, thank you for this excellent work, and I hope we can be bold in supporting the big things our region needs and look at how to integrate things like grid-scale battery storage into our climate action plans as well.
Great, Councilmember Boyd, and then Walsh, and then Adair.
I'll echo my fellow council members. Just amazing work. I'm so impressed by this, and particularly the ability to adapt to what you were hearing. I think you mentioned that you went in thinking it would be a little bit smaller of a revision, and then just based off of the feedback you were getting, launching it into a something much larger and collaborative and multiple touch points and all of the pages of the comments. And so I think that's really a model for this kind of work that I'd like to see repeated in other areas of city work. And I mentioned this to you, I think, earlier in an email, just some questions that I had about going from a 5-year plan to a 10-year plan, and you would answer those questions. I'm seeing within the plan, there's going to be an annual report, in-depth reviews or opportunities to adjust the targets. And so I'll just, put a pin in that of like not wanting, my worry is how do we keep, our bite-sized measurements of, not wanting to get to the end of 10 years and towards that end feeling like we're rushing maybe. And so I don't think that's going to happen, but just keeping an eye on that.
Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you. I will also echo the appreciation of listening to the community, the appreciation of going to the PD committee and saying, hey, let's focus a little bit more on greenhouse gases and what we can do there. And so I'm seeing the results of that in this. I think this is great. I think I will +1 to everything that Deputy Council President Zhang said. I didn't think that I was going to be talking about grid level batteries tonight, but I think it could be an interesting conversation for us to have. And I really think that we have the community here that is interested in leaning into big things and innovation. And so I see a lot of that already in this report. I see our staff taking that energy and still, pushing back on the, hey, yeah, 55% of tree canopy was what we had before, but let's talk about what we can achieve, what that actually looks like, what our land availability is, and make the necessary adjustments to still be, proactive and challenging ourselves, but being realistic on what we can accomplish. Appreciate the focus on the equity score and kind of how how we implement it as much as having a goal is really important. So really appreciate everything that we're seeing here. Thanks.
Councilmember Dare.
Yeah, I think this is just basically going to be a love fest for the amount of work you did and put into this. So echoing all those same comments, and so the amount and I actually spent a while looking through your implementation grid of just page after page of all the notes you took, and just being like, wow, this is like amazing that you did all this, amazing that, and also taking the point to list it all and go through it, and so amazing work there. And I want to also just, in particular, just point out, your, as mentioned by Councilmember Walsh, of that making a plan that makes us a leader but is achievable, because as we've all seen, there's always the danger of you make a big plan, you make a big promise, and if you don't actually get there, then everything just starts to feel very hollow. So I appreciate the thought that has gone into trying to do things that push us, but actually we could get there. So I appreciate that focus and what you've done into here. And so, yeah, I will, again, also support the ideas stated by my other former council members, in particular the ones you brought up. I also agree with Deputy President Chang about the wire-ready EV, which I think is a much better thing for our community at where we are, and the cost associated with that. I think, with like the PSA substation, there was talk that Highlands was already, like the conduits were already laid, so they can just plop the substation in. And so that idea on homes, I think, is a smart way to tackle that. And then, each of these policies will obviously be vetted as we go. I have, concerns about the replacement at time of loss for like certain, I've been in situations where we've lost heat and you got to get something fast. And so the idea of you're forced into something that you might not be able to afford is something that I would want addressed in any kind of plan there. Because I do obviously want the change, but I don't want to put people in some sort of, we can't get heat because we're forced to get this type we can't afford. So those types of things, and so making sure when we do get to the policy stage, we push ourselves, we are a leader, but we remember what it's going to cost the individuals that might have things. Make sure we keep them in mind as we go. And then my last point, which I'm blanking on, in terms of being a leader, is also just making sure that as we go and as we have success, making sure we're loud about it. And working with communications, and in order to be a leader, people need to know we're doing it. So making sure that we find ways to be very loud and proud of that as we achieve our various goals. So thank you.
Councilmember Joe.
Thank you. Appreciate all the hard work. I remember reading this before I came on council. I can't believe it's been 5 years now that have passed, but it's great to see the guideposts and goals that we've made, and the other ones that we've now taken a look at and figured out how we can achieve in a better way, and things that we need to kind of tweak to still reach our goals. So appreciate all the hard work. Great work there. Action 1.7, reduce localized air and stream pollutants. The feedback I would have on this particular one is take a look at what we're doing with stormwater already, and see if whether or not doing more in that category, the expenses outweigh the potential benefits that we already have from the stormwater system before the water gets to the streams. So just keep that in mind as a idea. The building and electric policies, action 1.3, implement a time of replacement energy. I do have some concerns about low-income people earning less than $200,000. I must be low income then. Anyway, the requirement for replacement, I think you did a really good job with the heat pump initiative over the last 2 or 3 years, where we were really trying to encourage people to switch to heat pumps. And if we're able to do that kind of program with this requirement, such that people are replacing their systems before they break down, then I think the requirement can work. But I don't want citizens to get into a situation that Councilmember Dare was talking about, where they're forced to buy something way beyond their means because it's broken down and we don't have an alternative. If we can provide an incentive or a program for people along the way, then I think that can work. With the Action 3.2, the multifamily requirement for installing electric vehicle raised stalls. I'm going to kind of go a little counter to my colleagues here. I would be more in favor of installing the tubes, the conduits for it, but not requiring the wiring. If the owner of the facility wants to put in the wiring later because their tenants want it put in there, then they can wire it, put in the equipment, and then talk to PSC about generating the additional load that's going to be necessary. I'd like to keep it so that it's possible for people to do it if the landowner or owner of the place wants to do it, but not necessarily require all the wiring up front, because that's a pretty big cost for a person trying to put a multifamily unit in the city. The other thing to consider is the cost of parking. In the past, and you'll have to check it just to be sure, and maybe the stats are a little bit different, but when you put in an EV spot, it has to be a little bit bigger than the normal spot. So if it's 1.25 for an EV spot versus 1 for a normal spot, or even smaller for a compact spot, we're going to be taking parking away from that unit as well, which is an added cost that potentially could be in there. So having the tubing there ready to be wired, you don't have to cut the spot out initially. You can keep the same number of spots in there, and then when the owner wants to put in the electric system for it, he can rejigger the lines and figure out how to rejigger his parking within that unit, and not necessarily take away those units, those parking stalls right at the beginning. So those are just some things to think about. If the spots are still normal size, and there isn't a need to have additional space for the electric generator or the charging device there, and it doesn't take away space, and that's great. But just another thing to think about as we're looking at this. Appreciate all the work again, and I think that our citizens really want to make a difference in climate. They want to know how they can help, and they want to have choices in terms of what they can do to help. And this policy, I think, has a potential to really empower people to prepare for emergencies themselves and prepare for the climate change and help see the changes they want to see in the world. Thank you very much.
Okay, before we wrap up, Councilmember Joe, I actually have a quick question for you. So is it easy for someone to, if the conduit, the tubes are in there, is it easy to put the wire through the tube?
I've never done that myself, but I think we need to talk to the people that do that to figure it out. We set up, okay, so when you take down overhead wires and you put in wires under the street, they put in the tube, and it's wide enough so that other utilities can go through there in the future, right? So that's one experience that I've had that I think relates to what I'm trying to talk about, but we would need to talk to the professionals about that to know for sure.
Great, yeah, if it's easy to put the wires in through the tube, then I'm totally open to not having the wires, but do you think probably, Alexis can talk to her friends over at NAOP about that? Great, any other comments? With that, do you have what you need?
Next steps and then approval process, if that's okay?
Okay,
Okay.
go for it.
Great. So our next step, you've seen the draft plan. We've gotten some really great feedback this evening. We're going to take another look at some of the actions. We may make some slight adjustments. Received a few typo corrections we'll look at. And then we've received verbal approval from the Environmental Board Wednesday evening. We'll share with them the feedback we received tonight, and they'll be providing a written recommendation. And then the other item I'll add here is we'll be reaching out to PSE about their large battery incentive program. It sounds like there's potential interest in that. So what we are looking for in terms of our next step, coming back to you all with the final plan for approval and adoption, we proposed a couple of options here, coming before one of the next council meetings. If you don't anticipate any major revisions, if we need further discussion, we can come back to PDE or a future committee of the whole. So looking for direction on how you would like to proceed with ICAP approval and adoption.
Great. Any council thoughts on this piece? Councilmember Joe?
I'd be in favor of bringing it back July 20th for approval and adoption, which still gives you the option of taking it to PDE on July 7th if something comes up in your research. And then we can stay on schedule to then adopt it before budget would be my preference.
Any other thoughts? General, Councilmember Nichols?
Yeah, seconding that, both for the council on July 20th with, I think maybe likely single touch point back at PD on the 7th with other things that you've heard either tonight or that continue to come up. I think it can probably be quick, but it might be good to plan on that.
I'm seeing nods. Great. Stacey, do you have what you need?
Do. Yes.
Great.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so
I'll do that.
much. Okay, that concludes this action item. The next item is good of the order. Does anyone have anything to talk about for the good of the order? Okay, no one else does. I have one item, only one. This is about the state legislative agenda. So we are having a breakfast with our state legislative delegation. I believe it's next Thursday, June 18th. So I just wanted to provide a quick update on kind of how we're planning on scheduling that. So you might have seen an email from city staff about, kind of the agenda for that. I think there was some concern about, the specific projects that were on that list. And I think given where we're at right now, we don't have an adopted state legislative agenda for 2027 yet. And so instead of, going through a list of specific projects, currently we're proposing just talking more about some of the broader themes that are important to the city, such as, transportation, which could be funding for specific transportation improvements that we think are priorities, or just like broader transportation policy type things. Housing, things like the Housing Trust Fund or other changes at the state level like condo liability reform or streamlining for things like smaller elevators or single stair that can make it easier to build more affordable housing. As we just spoke about, sustainability and climate action, there's some areas of our climate action plan where we really are going to need more action from the state. Local revenue tools, we are very constrained in what types of local revenue tools we have, and so advocating for some of those. And then public safety costs for things like public defense, jail, some additional needs for state funding there. So curious if there's anything else that we would like to add or any concerns. Councilmember Walsh.
How does this relate to the 7 topics that were sent out previously as topic items? Because your list there sounds much broader and doesn't include things like eCity Gov update, capital request for ECHOS, SR 18, which are very specific.
Yeah, so I think at this point, we're proposing not getting into super specifics. Since we haven't yet put together, as a council, we haven't had the discussion about what our specific priority should be. So at this point, we're kind of looking for feedback on, do we think those, 5 general areas are aligned with what we want to do? Councilmember Boyd?
I guess because I don't think I've seen it anywhere official, is the idea then that I think in the past, traditionally, there's been a dinner more towards fall, winter prior to session. So if you wanted to get into the specifics, that would be towards that latter quarter of the year.
I also am pretty new, so I have not attended such a dinner, but I think that sounds right. And I think we'll have more time, to hash it out. Councilmember Walsh.
We have always done a breakfast, at least in recent times, but it's always been right before session. And so I think the adjustment here is to have something a little bit earlier, that there's engagement, but I think I would ask back to City Administrator, do we plan to do another event when we have our legislative agenda, or is it more the action later would be adopt a legislative agenda and chop that out through our lobbyist?
I think, Councilmember Walsh, the idea is that this is, in essence, kind of replacing what we didn't do in the late 2025 timeframe. So we would still, recommendation would be to do a breakfast, November-ish, with the legislative agenda. I mean, it's clear that when we enter the biennium process, it's a more extensive review of the agenda. So that we haven't done yet. We've not talked about it. We're tentatively looking to at least have this on the July 27th council retreat to talk about process for this. But we really are concerned that it's going to be a very difficult session next year for cities. And the more we can do now to get in front of our legislators to talk about what our concerns are and put them on notice, the better. And I think one of the challenges we have is we don't have, there's been a transition of the council. The specifics may change, but we also don't want to lose this opportunity to reinforce some of the basic tenets, revenue, flexibility, public safety, housing, sustainability. So that's the goal. And this was discussed at council leadership over a couple of meetings, but most recently last week, and that's where the list came from, was a discussion with council leadership with the mayor.
I think, was it Councilmember Dare and then Nichols?
I mean, so like I agree with the general topics and even the list I was saying, those all things made sense. But I think what I'm hearing now and what I'm feeling now is that we might need to get a very clear goal of what we intend to get out of this breakfast. If like we haven't formalized what we want out of legislative session, if you know a lot of these the general topics are kind of, I think they know to some extent that those are things that are big for us. So I feel like we might need to get a specific goal in what we want to get out of this meeting. And if it's just to talk about these general broad ideas, fine, but that doesn't seem like enough or meat enough to do that. So I think that might be helpful to clarify of just kind of, you know, when we leave it, what do we hope we've achieved out of that breakfast?
I mean, I definitely think that's a good question. I think even, you know, like the relationship building aspect of things, I think is important. And also, you know, our legislators are also all accessible. So, you know, I've met with most of them individually in the past. And so, you know, want to also emphasize that that's something that you can do as an individual or as a council member. But I do think, especially at this point when we don't yet have our legislative agenda finalized, it is more of just like, you know, a relationship type thing where we're saying, hey, these are the areas that are important to us. And, you know, if you have bills that are in these areas, we're also happy to support.
And if I can add, you know, the one item that there's on the capital list, I know Mayor Mullet sees that there's a great opportunity with Representative Callan's new role in taking the lead on the capital budget for the House. And so I think maybe it may be worth a few moments to this evening. You know, the mayor feels strongly that we need to be aggressive in that area, especially, and that there are some capital needs, parks capital needs that we should at least try to put on the table. Now, we've not talked about it as a full council, but I think the mayor sees this as a good opportunity to do that. So unless there's wild objection to that, I think that perhaps, you know, that might be something that's a more specific. Other things on the list regarding public records, regarding the jail, I mean, those are all consistent with things that the council has previously talked about, but I think some of the feedback that Deputy Council President Jang received from some of you over the course of the last several days was that there was a little bit of discomfort getting into too terrible detail with some of that. So maybe splitting the difference is not a bad thing. Clearly, public safety costs are significant for us that are maybe not the same for some of the other communities our representatives represent. You know, the focus on affordable housing, again, some of our neighbor communities don't have that same focus. So I don't think it's a bad thing to talk about some of these larger topics, but I do know that Mayor Mullet is not going to want to miss the opportunity to talk about capital. As I think most of you know, he was responsible on the Senate side for the state capital budget, so seeing an opportunity to work closely with Representative Callan, I think he sees as a major issue for us in 27 moving forward. So, Deputy Council President, I think maybe that piece we would recommend we continue to be specific, but maybe, again, talk a little bit more in general terms about some of these other topics.
Yeah, I mean, does anyone have objections to talking about the ECH House at this meeting? Councilmember Walsh? I think it was, okay, Walsh and then Boyd. And then Nichols? I don't know.
Yeah. I think, I don't love the idea of making a capital ask before we have considered what our potential capital asks should be. So I appreciate that the mayor and that relationship and that there are opportunities there. The decision on what to fund or what to ask for, I think should come to the council. I think we can have some great conversations about the pros and cons of different things, both in what are important to us as a city and what are viable for a capital ask, what are most likely to be successful. But I would like to have that conversation about more than just a single project.
Councilmember Nichols, I think you're next. Oh.
I'll speak to both points, both the broader point about the what level of specificity should we be getting into now, and then the specific question on this specific capital ask regarding the Echoes. As far as the broader points, I agree with the concept of keeping this, at least initial meeting, pretty high level and not lean in too much on the details of any particular policy or any particular ask, or certainly any particular talking points. With the reason being that we have many new folks on council. I suspect that there will both be things that are the same, but there will almost certainly be things that are different. Another reason to delay somewhat on the details is that we've gotten a good number of public comment lately, multiple emails even today, requesting some process for the community to be able to impact our legislative agenda in ways that have not always been as accessible in the past. I think that's a good idea. I think there's a lot of things that the community wants that we as a city cannot necessarily do on our own, but that we can utilize our lobbying efforts and that will be more powerfully stated if we say both this is a community driven effort, we have feedback from the community, this is something we want, and we're also supporting it from the city perspective jointly. I think that is that will have a multiplicative effect that could be very powerful and useful for us. On any particular ask, whether it's a capital ask or otherwise, I don't know that we should put, I would caution us against putting too much weight on any particular meeting, especially a kind of informal breakfast. I think we will have plenty of additional touch points with all of our legislators in both the 5th and the 41st. If this is a capital ask that becomes a consensus ask, I think we will have more than enough opportunity to communicate that to all of our representatives, and that there's no particular urgency for this individual meeting on that topic, and we're not going to lose anything in reality. We can still have anyone can still, as an individual, have those conversations with including the mayor. So we will have time to have those conversations, and I think both to allow us as a council to come to a consensus with the administration as well, and to allow for better community input on these. I think keeping to the same high level things we always talk about, housing, transportation, et cetera, that's fine. Those are almost certainly going to stay the same. But the specific policies, I suspect there's room for debate, and I think we should allow that debate to happen.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Boyd.
I'm just saying for the record that I'm intentionally staying out of this conversation just for considerations with my day job. And so Councilmember Nichols mentioned, debating different projects, and I will let you all do that. And I plan on attending the breakfast in my councilmember role, but won't necessarily be, I think I'll be in listening mode.
Great, thank you. Any other comments, questions? Councilmember Joe?
I'll just bring a different perspective that when you lobby a body, whether it's a city council or a planning commission or house rep or senator, the city needs to be in front of that representative constantly with an ask that we want to see done. Now, maybe we don't accept the funding later, but we need to have those conversations from even a preliminary point of view right now, if we think that it's something that we might want to ask for by November, December. They need to have it on their mind. They need to have it as something on their list that, oh, Issaquah is talking about this. Maybe they don't want it right now, but they're talking about it. So I need to pay attention to it and monitor and watch it. And you've got to build that lobbying effort starting in the summer, carry it through the fall so that it's ready to go in November. That's all to say I don't know what we're asking for, but I think that we've talked about the Eck House a little bit, and it's part of the potential park bond that we've been talking about. So I don't think it's out of the realm of things that we would talk about to discuss the potential ideas that we have on the Eck House right now. You've got to break that ground. You've got to start having that as a piece of conversation for your legislators all the way through that process, so that by the time you get to November, it's a natural thing for them to say, yes, you've told me about it, I know everything about it, and now I want to go and try to do it. So my take is that, yeah, if we decide not to do a conversation about a capital piece, or the Eck House even, as it might be, I think we should still give our mayor the freedom to go ahead and have those conversations and start breaking that ground. And if other council members feel it's an important project, I'm just going to let you guys know that, you know, I think it's an important project that I want to start talking to legislators about. Not say that I can commit the council to anything, but my experience as a person who lobbies bodies is that you need to start it right now and build that base beyond just building the relationship with them, but building that base to start talking about capital projects. So at the very least, I think we should give the mayor permission, direction, or the sign off to go ahead and start talking about the capital projects that we've been talking about as a body over this time period, not committing to any one particular one, but let him start talking about those, because he's a professional, he knows what he's doing. And if we want to get that funding for whatever project, he's got to start breaking that ground right now. So that's my thought on it.
Thank you. Councilmember Dare?
Well, I think now I'm going to end up extending the conversation, 'cause especially after those comments by Councilmember Joe, I'm kind of leaning more towards these specific topics that were in the original email, and not necessarily as that we all are on consensus in this, but it does seem true that, like, any true policy for the legislative agenda is going to take a lot of time to develop, and the more these are things we're thinking about, and we may not necessarily have we voted on them, but to start these conversations and start getting our legislators thinking about how to tackle them and starting other conversations does seem important, and does seem good for us to have some specific things we're going to be talking about with them to see what is the viability of these. Are these even achievable? Or what do they need from us until then to be ready for it? And so I am now leaning a little bit towards more at least some of these specific projects being our topic points, because I think that that's useful for the long-term discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree on the importance of specific projects, but I mean, if we're getting into specific projects, I have some specific projects that are not on the list that I would like to see added. In particular, roundabouts on SR 900, living in Tallis. That's probably, you know, like last year we'd looked into, oh, if we like added another lane slightly past, you know, Tallis Drive, would that do anything? It's like, you can have 25 more cars parked there, but it doesn't do anything because the, you know, the point of issue is, you know, the traffic light at May Valley Road and at J. Berry's Cafe. So, I mean, if we're talking about things that will improve traffic flow in Issaquah, that could be a major one. I mean, if, especially like Highway 18, the nexus is very, very indirect. And, you know, SR 900 is a state road, and there's various, you know, it's a blessing and a curse. So I think, you know, if we're going to go into specific projects, I think we should also open the floor to what are some of the other specific projects that we might want to consider. But that might also, I don't know, it's like, does that make it too messy? Or should we just try to do it on an expedited timeline, say, okay, everyone, come up with a list, and then we'll all hash it out at the next council meeting? Councilmember Walsh.
So this is a different time period than we've usually done this. And so I think as much as this is a good time to do engagement, we are unfortunately coming at this with a new council and a new mayor who haven't had that conversation about what the priorities are. So I think as much as I would like to have the specific conversations with our legislators at this early time, and I think that should be our goal, I don't think we're ready to do that at this point. So I think we need to default to utilizing this for networking and general topics. And if we want to make it a priority that we talk about our legislative agenda, in July or in September so that we have it earlier rather than later, I think that's great. But I just don't see how we can have a specific conversation.
Councilmember Nichols?
Yeah, and on that same point, I think the difficulties of having a specific conversation and then having a process where we go through and are very deliberative and open up, especially to the public, for additional ideas, both to be added or removed. It's hard to reel things back once we put them out there, and we only get so many priorities that we can really talk about. I mean, 7 is frankly probably a lot already. So historically, my understanding is we have not started breakfast lobbying. I guess that's what the term, I'm not sure what to call this exactly. At this stage of the year, I think this is a nice addition since this was not feasible last year for a variety of reasons. This is a nice addition to the schedule to help build some connections. I don't think that I mean, anyone should be, of course, able to talk to anyone in our legislative delegation at any point, whether that's the mayor, who I'm certain does, or any of us. I don't think anyone would hold that against anyone. There's plenty of opportunity to do so. The difference is whether if we communicate something as a consensus, that implies a consensus, and I think it will be nigh impossible for us to get there tonight, starting at 9:15. I suspect it would be hard for us to get there as a single body, even in the next couple weeks. And I think it will be impossible for us to get good public feedback. And we have heard from the public that they would like to have an opportunity to help utilize us to better be their voice in some of the lobbying efforts that are out there. So I would again, with all of that, recommend that we keep it as a good networking opportunity. We should all strive to have good relationships with all of our legislators, and pause briefly on a statement of consensus while still driving towards getting that consensus relatively quickly towards Councilmember Joe's point that sooner is going to be better, and we can start communicating that better sooner if we have it sooner.
Great. Yeah, I think I'm in agreement with that point. I think, I think the sooner we can get to a good place with our full legislative agenda, the better. But I think we're not yet ready at this point to say, here's, the city's priorities. So I think, keeping it relatively high level and saying, we're very excited that Representative Callan now has this capital budget role, and we will have some specific asks for you in our next breakfast lobbying meeting, or whatever the case may be. City Administrator, anything to add?
Just so I'm clear, so we can take this back to Mayor Mullet. Hopefully council leadership can talk about this on Wednesday morning and get this finalized. There seems to be consensus to talk about the broader topics off the top of my head: housing, sustainability, public safety writ large, the need for alternate revenue sources for cities. I think that's
transportation.
4, and transportation, that's 5. So I think one of the reasons we were trying to give a speaking role for every member of the council. We've done this in the past where 1 or 2 have said something, the rest have not, and then the others have felt they didn't have a proper opportunity to participate. So we're trying to give everyone that opportunity to say something. So the magic number is the number of people around the table versus what the council's priorities would be. So does that sound reasonable? with those, was it 5, Deputy Council President, that I rattled off?
Councilmember Walsh?
I volunteer as tribute to not speak so that we don't have to talk about 7 things and we can keep a good relationship with our legislators.
Well, and I think we've, built that in as well. We often have not allowed them time to talk, and so that has also been a criticism that we've heard. So we're trying to do a lot of things in a relatively short period of time. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a very, very difficult session next year. The governor already announced today that he's asked all of the state departments to begin making cuts. They will come and look for additional revenue sources from things that we benefit from. The legislature will likely start taking away some of the prerogatives that we have, because it's happening in state after state all over America. And so I think really we just need to communicate how important the services we provide are, and how important it is that we have the revenue in order to provide those services. So hopefully that's something everybody can agree on the council. And if it is, we can craft this in such a way that, working with Deputy Council President Jang, so that we have a good breakfast next week.
Yep. Councilmember Boyd?
I'm actually happy to volunteer to not speak, or if there's things that you would like to share that city programs, things to highlight. I think that I'll double check, but that might be within my bounds. But
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first part what you said.
Oh, we're talking about folks volunteering to not speak up or share the various, even just high level potential agenda items. I can take myself off the speaking list.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm still having a little trouble hearing you, but I'm getting a little clogged up in my ears tonight.
Oh, sorry. I'm happy to volunteer to not speak.
Oh, right, no, yeah, thank you. And you were already not on the list.
Okay.
So we need something for the mayor, so I think that was the idea.
Great. Any other
I
thoughts or
apologize.
comment on this? You think we have what we need?
Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, if there's nothing else for the good of the order, we are adjourned at, oh God, I need to log in to see what time it is. 9:19 p.m.